we can get started. Since we only have a little over an hour, I want to make sure we pack it in. My name is Dana Giroux, and I'm the library director here. And I just want to welcome you to the library. I'll see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces. Come talk to me after if you ever want to talk about Ancestry.com in the library, or Fold 3, or Family Search, or anything related to history, and we're happy to talk about that. We're super excited to talk about our local history projects. We're doing a lot of things here in the library so that we can turn it into an archive. So we want to be the source for Spring Hill history and documents. If you have anything you want to share with future Spring Hillians, please bring it in and we will scan it and we'll hand it right back to you. We'll do no harm to it if it's something you want to share as your legacy. And we're hoping to get a new library built in the next 5 years, and we'd like to build a local history center inside of it.
Ann's here, it'll be 2 years.
So we bag every day. If you want to help me bag, it's boma@springhilltn.org, and I'd be happy to share that with you anytime. And that goes to all of them at once, and now's the time. They are considering it in the next couple of weeks, whether it goes higher up on the plan. So like I said, we'd like about 500, 600 square feet dedicated just to Spring Hill history. So that's the plan. So see me if you want to talk about that. So right now, Alicia Fitz is going to introduce our lovely speaker that we're very excited.
But before I do that, I'm going to do a plug for the Friends of the Library.
Oh, yes.
Friends of the Library is the volunteer organization that supports the library. They're the ones that do the pop-up book sales that we see on a regular basis, among many other things. It's a whopping $10 a year, ladies. Is that right? Wendy's in the back. It's a great organization to be a part of, a great way to support the library, in both in terms of time and a few dollars as well. And also, they have the opportunity to buy these lovely blue shirts that you can wear to the BOMA meetings to make our voices even louder.
But you too can be a lady in blue.
Yes, exactly. So.
Or a brick paver for the reading patio at the new library. We'll be talking about that coming up. They've been fundraising their hearts out for, gosh, how many years? 30 some, more than that. For a very, very long time. And you'll see a lot of the friends throughout the room, and they've helped sponsor the snacks tonight, along with the Historic Commission that Alicia's going to talk about.
So I'm Alicia Fitz. I'm currently here as a member of the Historic Commission. We are collaborating with the Spring Hill Public Library on this series of speakers. I'm curious how many of you were here in September for the spiel? Excellent, what we're looking for. Heads up, the next one, all of these will be on the 4th Tuesday of the month except for December and over the summer. So you can pretty much do those as clockworks. We're still lining up speakers and topics for January forward. In the meanwhile, the one exception to the Tuesday rule is next month. Next month's will be November 20th, which is a Saturday at 3 p.m. And we are very, very grateful to be able to do the presentation, or to have Eric Jacobson of the Battle of Franklin Trust do the presentation at Rippavilla to talk about Rippavilla and the Battle of Spring Hill. There is going to be limited seating because we'll be sitting inside the house. So please, when you see it come up, go ahead and register and get your seat. It is I wrote this down because I can't ever remember this date, is the 157th anniversary of the Battle of Spring Hill. So there's some of you going, why are we still talking about this? Because frankly, as we Episcopalians would say, we did a lot of things and we left a lot of things undone, and we're still dealing with that as a community and as a country. So Eric has a wonderful way of presenting the facts of what happened, and also the story and the ramifications of that. So it is also an opportunity. Some of you know that Rippavilla underwent a management change at the beginning, in May actually. And so it's a great opportunity to get into the house and see some of the architectural work that they've been able to uncover as they've taken it over. So please do that. Question, what is one thing that everybody remembers from last time's presentation? Besides the front row delinquent people, though. Besides those folks. One thing that you took away from last month? Yes.
The paucity of African American history and sources in this area, for an area that once had a majority African American population.
Thank you, Tom. Very, very valid point.
So about the fire too.
The fires plural?
That was it.
Yes.
We used to have a town square.
We did?
Well, I thought I got that idea.
We had a downtown area, for sure. A very active downtown area. But because this is actually one of the sort of fallacies that floats around, so thank you for this. There's a perception that because Franklin had a square and Columbia had a square, where is our square? The reality is we were not a county seat. So we didn't need to have a square with a courthouse. But we did have a really proactive, busy heart and soul of Main Street in what I now refer to as Old Town. So basically from Kedron to Duplex. The two fires and the tornado managed to do a pretty good hit on that. So what we wanted to do with that first session was give everyone sort of an overview, and for those of you who were born and raised here or been here a really long time, remind you of where we've come from, that this has always been a community that's been involved with change. What we're going to do going forward is dig a little bit deeper into some of the topics that Tom Price touched on last week. Now I could throw out a bunch of family names, Chairs, Pointer, Russell, Mitchum, Doherty, a lot of those, Bond. Those were the founding families. But if I throw out these names, Star Pointer, Billy Direct, Duplex, Brown Howell, Walter Direct, Little Brown Jug, and no, that's not liquor. So we're really fortunate tonight to have Sarah Elizabeth Hickman McLeod, who's going to talk to us about Pop Greers, who was involved with many of those horses, or at least their lineage. And I wanted to throw out something that I actually just found out this afternoon, because I just think it's intriguing. In 1936, Haynes Haven, where Saturn is, the big white house on the west side of the interstate, was sold to Mr. Colonel Haynes. He was actually a native of Murfreesboro, but he'd gone and made money in oil and come back to this area. And he bought that house when a man named Mr. Tolley had died. He bought 550 acres, or a little under that. Anybody want to guess what he paid for it in 1936? I'm sorry? $90,000 for 550 acres. You can add zeros to that all day long for today. But one of the descriptions of that was that this area had some of the best bluegrass, and there are people who would argue that it had better bluegrass than Kentucky. So along with the description that James Trotwood Moore, a poet, described, and Columbia claims this, but so does Spring Hill, that we are the dimple of the universe, you have this concept that this was a very lush territory, and horses were a huge part of that. So now I'm going to read a little bit of Sarah Elizabeth's bio. I've known Sarah Elizabeth for a while, and I didn't know some of these things. So, born and raised in Murray County, that I did know. She lives on her great-grandmother's farm in Carter's Creek with her husband, Sean, and her daughter, Ellie Grace. Her parents, Eddie and Sheila Hickman, are retired educators. Sarah Elizabeth's love of Murray County history started at an early age and has continued through her life. She's a graduate of Columbia Central High School in Middle Tennessee State. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Mass Communications with minors in History and Marketing and a Master of Arts in Public History. Prior to coming back to work in Murray County, she worked for 8 years in Nashville at 1220 Exhibits, a museum fabrication company. They designed and built museum exhibits throughout the United States. After Ellie Grace was born, Sarah Elizabeth returned to Murray County to make a difference in her community, and she does. She's currently the Historic Preservationist at the South Central Tennessee Development District, and is finishing up her book about Pop Greers, which will be published in a few months. And so for right now, y'all get a heads up on the book. Sarah Elizabeth.
Well, thank y'all for coming tonight, and thank you to the Spring Hill Public Library and the Spring Hill Historic Commission, which I get to work with professionally as well with historic preservation, for asking me to come today to speak with you about my research and my upcoming book. So why would a girl several years after Pop Greers died want to write her master's thesis on a harness racer? Well, first off, I grew up on my great-grandmother's farm. When I could sit up, my grandfather, Clifford Hutcherson, put me on my horse, and I've been riding horses ever since. I love horses, I love Murray County. And so when it came time to pick my thesis topic, I went and talked to Bob Duncan at the Murray County Archives. I was his intern the previous summer because I considered being an archivist, but that changed. And I came in and he said, "What's going on, Sarah Elizabeth?" And I said, "I want to do something that has never been written about Murray County in depth, that needs to be written about Murray County, that has to do with horses." He handed me 2 folders. I sat down in the archives. If you all have not been to the Murray County archives, please go. They're a wealth of knowledge and a great repository for our county's history and the municipalities in Murray County. I sat and read the first article. I stopped. I said, "I'm going to the copy machine. I'll probably have to write you a check when I leave because I'm making a copy of every piece of paper in this folder." That journey started in the fall of 2005. So here we are in 2021. While updating my slide presentation, I came across a wonderful little section in an article that I think it's fitting to start the presentation tonight. "In the annals of sports, as nowhere else, is Dame Fortune so fickle in the treatment of her devotees. The stars of today are forgotten tomorrow, and the new ones take their place. Lucky indeed who occupies the public eye for a length of time." Edward Franklin Pop Greers did just that. Pop's his nickname, so you will hear me refer to him as Pop or Geers throughout the presentation. He got the nickname Pop the day he got a telegram while he was racing that his son Walter Aiken Geers was born, and one of his helpers remarked, "Well, Ed, you're a Pop now." So that's how we got Pop. On January 25th, 2021, he would have celebrated his 170th birthday. In 1851, he was born in Lebanon, Tennessee. He was the son of William Gideon and William Wooler Geers. This is their house that we have a photograph of. It is not there today. There's actually a subdivision there today in Lebanon, but the road is Geers Lane or Geers Road, and there's a Geers family cemetery on that property. As we all know around here, family cemeteries are on family farms, so respect that as well. There's a lady that lives in that subdivision that carefully takes care of that cemetery for the Geers family. He saw races in early years, and he decided he wanted to be a trainer, much to the dismay of his parents. As we all know, our parents are our driving force behind what we do in life sometimes. At 10, he yoked 2 calves together, and the escapade resulted in a calf losing half of his tail. This illustration is in his book that I have sitting up here on the table he wrote in 1901. But after the calf losing the half of his tail, years later he traded them for a 2-year colt for $50 from his father. Every first Monday in April, which we now celebrate as Mule Day, farmers brought their stock to sell and trade in town. Also, it encouraged farmers to visit some of the farms that had breeding facilities in the area. In 1868, he brought his first trotting mare and trained him using his intuition and sold her. He said that this officially began his career. After he sold the mare, he bought a horse from the butcher and a sulky for $50. He then deemed himself fully equipped to train. There weren't many tracks around after the Civil War. He said that there was a dilapidated mile around, but there really wasn't a really good track. He made his own track, staking out each end using a rope to measure it to scale to the other end. As we all know, training took a back seat to his studies when he was younger, so his time was limited. The completed track was 1/3 of a mile long. It was very short and not easy to turn the horse. Geers had to take the horse to the road to reach a certain trotting gait. As the training continued, the horses were able to trot the mile in 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Locals began to take notice, and he said that there were about 2 to 3 men in Tennessee at the time that pretended to condition and handle horses for speed. He soon had several horses to train, and he reminisced in 1913 that when he commenced his career as a driver, he promised his mother to never drink and that he would never pull a horse or do anything dishonorable that would cause a blush of shame to her cheek. And he kept to that motto and that promise. Reverend Talbert Fanning, a local Church of Christ minister, was his first client. Now, most of us who know Church of Christ people, this is kind of odd. When I hit this tidbit, when I started researching, I called my mother, who is a graduate of David Lipscomb University. I remembered she lived in Fanning Hall, David Lipscomb, and I asked, did you know this? And she said no. So I kept digging. So he hired Pop in 1871 to race Little Dave, hitched to a high-wheel sulky. Geers raced him to 3 minutes and 4 seconds. Not the best record, but he won the race at the Lebanon Fair. So, right now I'm going to stop before I get ahead of myself and explain some harness racing basics. So consider this a crash course.
There you go.
Literally, thank you, whoever's helping with that. Alicia, thank you. So the standardbred is the name of the breed of horse. The name originates from the horse's ability to pace and trot a mile under a standard amount of time. So we got two types of standardbreds. Got the trotter, and the trotter moves at a diagonal gait. Left foreleg moves in tandem with the right hind leg and the right foreleg with the left hind. Although the trot is one of the horse's natural gaits, it takes a lot of training to keep a horse from breaking into a gallop, as we know, or a canter at a high speed. So trainers often use a system of straps and pulleys to keep the diagonal legs moving in unison. Pacers, on the other hand, have a lateral gait. The right leg moves together and the left leg moves together. This side-to-side motion is why pacers are sometimes called side wheelers. There are sets of plastic loops called hobbles that are used in training to keep the legs on each side synchronized. So I think it's just like synchronized swimming. This is synchronized horses. Among the harness racers, pacers have the faster gait and outnumber trotters on the tracks by 4-1. If a trotter or pacer breaks into a canter or gallop during a race, it must be pulled back and correct its gait or lose its ground or be disqualified. Most races are a mile. There are tracks that are a half a mile, which the horse has to make 4 turns. There's 5/8 of a mile, which they have to do 3 turns, and 1 mile, which is only 2 turns. Horses begin the race behind a moving starting gate. So the ones I have seen are Cadillacs, old, big Cadillacs, like your grandparents would drive, or my grandparents would have driven. And they have these arms on each side, and they have to line up to the gate. And when they hit the starting pole, they fold up, and the car races out of the way. I actually got to ride in one at the Lincoln County Fair in Fayetteville several years ago. That was quite a treat. The horse's average speed is 25 to 30 miles per hour. So, if you ever go that speed on Carter's Creek Pike, you're probably going to get past. But that is what they do. A recent world record was a horse did the mile in 1 minute and 46 seconds. That's in today's time. So you're going to hear some other times here after this. So just keep that in mind. Horses can race from the time they are 2 years old till they're 15 years old. And they are trained to a jog cart, and then they are trained to a sulky. And I'll cover the sulkies in just a minute. So now back to Pop. In 1875, he opened his public training stable in Nashville. The picture right here is the racetrack at the Nashville Fairgrounds, courtesy of the Tennessee State Library and Archives. During this time, he met Major Campbell Brown of Spring Hill. He was the grandest and best informed in all that pertained to the breed of fast horses I have ever known. Geers contracted with Brown to start training. In 1876, Geers closed his training stables in Nashville and moved to Columbia to the old fairgrounds, which was also known as the Aiken Farm. From the courthouse in downtown Columbia, you take Trotwood Avenue to the Mount Pleasant Pike, close to where Graymer Church of Christ is today. Or he would be in Spring Hill, but his base was in Columbia. I tried to weave in Spring Hill things in this presentation that y'all pass every day, or you pass sometimes. So you can think about, when you pass these now, I actually know what this is about. He would train here for the next 15 years. His first race in the surrounding racing circuits was with East Lynn and Diana. And this article is the earliest article I have found of him racing, and it was 1875 in the Nashville Union and American paper. In 1878, he invaded the Northern Grand Circuit with Alice West, one of Major Brown's horses, and drove her to a record of 2 minutes, 26 seconds. He raced later in Georgia that year and was racing Lizzie II. The next few years proved to be good ones, and he started making a name for himself. Another famous horse from Spring Hill that Geers trained was Duplex, who was owned by John Willis Napier Lee. He was a bay horse, and Geers trained him at the old fairgrounds where his training stables were located. His first record was 2 minutes, 17 seconds and a quarter for the mile. During the race season of 1887, he placed first and second place 4 times and third place once. Winnings that year totaled $2,300. That was a lot of money back then. In 1889, fate put 2 great horses in Geers' hands. Actually, Campbell Brown did. They would make him famous for racing the Howe family of horses as pacers. Pacers originally were not thought of as a factor until the advent of the Howe family. They were said to be a legitimate product of a scientific breeding, of soil, of climate, and grass out of an obscure family of saddle horses bred with no idea of racing and never a thought of fame. They were important to Murray County and the harness racing industry. They were known for their speed. Little Brown Jug in the top corner was the first of the Howes to make a name for the family, and there's actually still a race conducted every year called the Little Brown Jug. Brown Howe was a full brother to Little Brown Jug, if horses can have full brothers. Brown Howe was a good horse, but eventually became lame, and he was sent home, and he remained at the Browns' farm, Ewell Farm, for the rest of his life, and is buried somewhere on the property. Now we're to Howe Pointer. Howe was born in Murray County, and he was owned by Captain Henry Pointer, who donated the horse to the Spring Hill Presbyterian Church. They sold the horse to Mr. Walter Steele to acquire funds to fix the church. They believed he inherited the Presbyterian doctrine of predestination and did not believe he would fall from grace on the home stretch. His biggest rivalry was Direct, a stallion from California. Some thought Direct that could beat Howe Pointer. In their first meeting in Terre Haute, Indiana, Howe Pointer won. In their second meeting in Nashville, Direct won. In their third meeting at the Columbia Kite Track near Baker Elementary School, where my daughter Ellie Grace attends school and where I attended elementary school out on the Hampshire Pike, Howe Pointer made Direct run 3 of the fastest heats ever in harness racing at that time, with Direct winning. Gamblers lost their shirt tails. Reporters commented that everyone in Murray County would be mourning tonight. And this is the Kite Track. It was a short-lived kind of design for a track. This track eventually was sold to mine for phosphate, the next big cash king here in Murray County. The rivalry was removed. Direct and Howe Pointer met 3 more times, and in their final meeting in Columbus, Ohio, it was 5 heats. Howe Pointer won 3 and Direct won 2, and Direct was worn out. Howe Pointer retired in 1895 with 35 races won out of 47 that he ran. Everything considered, Howe Pointer was the greatest horse I have ever driven. Geers drove him with an open bridle and no blinders. And when Howe Pointer died, it was in the newspaper, and the courthouse bells told his death. As you can see in the Daily Herald, it says Howe Pointer passed away. In 1891, he moved to New York to the Hamlin Farm, 17 miles outside of Buffalo in East Aurora, to work for C.J. Hamlin. The farm was 1,000 acres with a covered track. They had 550 horses on that farm, 20 stallions in service, 140 broodmares, 554 filly colts and geldings. Geers was paid $10,000 a year in 1891. I did some checking on that, and in 2021, that would have been around $301,000 a year. That was the largest ever received up to the time by one in his profession. He remained there until 1902. Mr. Hamlin and him had a rivalry of sorts. Mr. Hamlin would drive a pair of horses they called roasters to the corner of Main and Division Street in Buffalo in a half an hour from the village farm with a basket of eggs in between his knees. Geers was competitive, as we know, and he decided to go after this record, and he drove it a minute less than Mr. Hamlin, his boss, and no eggs were broken. The greatest feat he ever accomplished as a reinsman, which is very brave, is he hooked 3 horses together, Belle Hamlin, Justina, and Globe, to a 4-wheel skeleton sulky and set the first triplicate record in Cleveland, Ohio for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. And then he did a double team of Belle Hamlin and Honest George and to 2 minutes 12 seconds. And he said that he would never do that again. That's a brave person. He was a pioneer in racing equipment. He introduced the bicycle sulky. He was introduced to the bicycle sulky by Bud Doble. It was invented by Sterling Elliott, and he tried it after he raced his horse to a traditional high wheel sulky. So for image purposes, this is a high wheel sulky, and this is the new bicycle sulky. So to a high wheel sulky, he raced the mile in 2 minutes 23 and a half seconds. Then with the bicycle sulky, he did it in 2 minutes 21 and a half seconds. So he raced that afternoon with a bicycle sulky to Honest George. He wore a black cap and a jacket for most of his career, but in 1914 he tried to wear a new racing jacket. It was said by his friend Plummer Webster that it had hues of Jacob's striped coat. I can only imagine what it looked like. His horses were so scared of him they would not let him in the stalls. All drivers had race riders and driver's license through the National Trotting Association, and I like to think he got his hair just cut that day. For that In the early 1890s, he set several more driving records with Robert J. Nightingale and the Corporal. He won $10,000 with Corporal. Now we're to another Spring Hill horse, Star Pointer. Star Pointer was trained by Pop Greers from 1894 to 1896, and he continued to lower times throughout their tenure together. Eventually, Star Pointer would be the first pacer to equal or break the 2-minute mark. In August of 1897 in Readyville, Massachusetts, with David McClary up, Star Pointer sped the mile in 1 minute 59 and a quarter seconds. 5,000 spectators were there. Star Pointer started 32 races and won 22 out of them. It was considered the harness horse of the century. He was foaled in Spring Hill in 1889, and you can see this plaque when you drive through Spring Hill. Fairs were great occasions throughout the countryside. Dr. Wooldridge in Columbia was the chair of the Tennessee Fair Association. Mornings there were judging livestock, farm products, fancy work, and then they had basket dinners and big picnics. After dinner, the horse racing began. And this is a cover that was found in a deposition that they found in the archives, cleaning a case that was heard during to the Murray County court system. And they sent that to me, and I thought that was the greatest thing because I had never seen one. This is a really bad picture. This was in the Murray Democrat, but this is the South Side Park. So if you're driving down Carmack Boulevard in Columbia today, and you see the water tower that says Tennessee Knitting Mills, that's where the South Side Park was. In later years, my dad played baseball in that park. So it's kind of cool to pass places that I try to imagine every day what it looks like. But in 1905, the Tennessee General Assembly did an anti-betting law. And in 1907, they drove the anti-betting law home with an act to prohibit betting or wagering in any kind of horse race. So I believe that is what killed the harness racing industry in Tennessee. There's only one harness race left that's held in the state. It's at the Lincoln County Fair in Fayetteville, and it's held each fall. And I just went this year, and it was an amazing day, a beautiful day, and we saw some fine horses run. In 1901, he wrote his autobiography. You could buy a copy locally at the Dr. Wooldridge's drugstore. I know of 3 copies. The Archives here in Murray County, the Warden Collection at MTSU in the Gore Center, and my copy. Although a copy has been reprinted in pamphlet form today in the last few years, you can get that. But mine is autographed, and I paid a pretty penny for it for a poor college kid at the time. I think my parents helped me with that. But he was front page news throughout the country, including Alaska and Hawaii. It was big news when a filly was foaled in town, especially if it was in the Howe family. I can't imagine a newspaper publishing that kind of stuff today at all. In 30 years of racing, he still had time for hobbies. He played a card game called Pedro. He played pool until his eyesight failed. He was a Presbyterian, that I have confirmed. He loved fox hunting. He was a storyteller enhanced by his dialect. And one of his favorite stories is an alligator story about an alligator in the Tombigbee River. Vices in life were vanilla ice cream and cigars. It was said that he could hunker down with a well-worn deck chair and finish off a pint of vanilla ice cream in the time it took a horse to go a good mile. He must be shoveling with that. He was a celebrity of his day. During his tenure at Billings Park in Memphis, he rode a streetcar home and everyone spoke to him. And like I said, he was front page news. He was one of the very few trainers that had both white and black grooms. Geers' docile ways created a harmonious atmosphere for his employees. He had friends that included the Commodore Vanderbilt, General Grant, Robert Bronner, and of course John Trotwood Moore. He was a family man. His wife was Mamie Smith from Columbia. She had a daughter from a previous marriage, Emma Neely. They had daughters Edna Pierce, Mary O, and Walter Aiken. I will have to say Walter Aiken his life ended very tragically in 1906. He was the first cadet enrolled at Columbia Military Academy, which is now known as Columbia Academy. He was playing a baseball game against the Morgan School from Petersburg, and he was hit in the head, and he died of a fractured skull. He had a daughter named Sarah Elizabeth, which I think is pretty cool. In 1902, he lived in Memphis. He spent most of his life traveling on the road by train or automobile. He had a little dog that welcomed him back to the stables. The dog seemed to know when things were right and when things went wrong. He had several grooms that traveled with him, and I have researched them pretty extensively, and they will be talked about in the book, which is pretty cool. When I started this in 2005, as we all know, the internet and research was not, you would have to spend years in repositories researching. The Library of Congress has newspapers that have been digitized throughout the United States. And I can spend hours reading newspaper articles. And that's why I decided to go ahead and finish out this book. People have pleaded with me for years, including my family, to finish this, and I always come up with some excuse, and this is the year that no excuses. But Geers topped the list. He was one of the winningest drivers in history. He had 31 horses, 210 or better. In a testimonial, I'm getting ahead of myself. In a testimonial shown here is a menu from a dinner that was given in Geers' honors at the Copley Plaza Hotel in Boston, Massachusetts in 1918. Many leaders in the trotting horse world gathered there to pay tribute to a great Tennessee driver. There are pictures of his horses were drawn on the menu by W.L. Duntley, and Calvin Coolidge, then governor of Massachusetts, was the speaker at the dinner. In 1914, of 25 years, he totaled $1.178 $454, so over $1 million in 25 years of racing. And now we are getting to, I'm just showing y'all some newspaper things that I have found. Now we're to Napoleon Direct, another famous horse. One of Geers' greatest horses. His first season he won 10 out of 14 races. The next season he recorded a time of 1 minute 59 3/4 of a second. He won 21 out of 23 heats started. He retired and he was a stud at the Ewell Farm, as Alicia was talking about earlier. And there is a historical marker to Billy Direct talking about his son, Napoleon Direct. And this talks about when a plow horse paces under a mile in 2 minutes. He did not like his image taken. He did not like his image drawn, but we've got a whole bunch of them. This, horses are buried at Haynes Haven, and this is the horse graveyard at Haynes Haven. And Haynes Peacock, a famous Tennessee walking horse, is buried there as well. Haynes Peacock was the only gelding to ever win the World Grand Championship in Shelbyville. I might have that in trivia someday, and y'all remember I said that. Napoleon Direct died on Pop's birthday while exercising on the track where Saturn plant is now. This is 1940. It's a 1946 40s. This is at the Tennessee State Library and Archives. This is Haynes Haven. As you can see, there's the house. There was a small track right here in front of the barns. And then all the paddocks for the horses. And then there's the big racetrack in the back. I was excited when I found this. There was an artist that was named Robert Dickey, and he loved to do caricatures of Pop. He drew for the Horse Review as well as Life magazine and the Saturday Evening Post. This is Bob Duncan's favorite caricature of Pop. This is actually a picture of Robert Dickey and Pop together in Goshen, New York. And this was Pop's favorite caricature of him because he was always in an accident. He had broken his leg, broken his arm. He was hurt numerous times. So this was pretty cool. As Pop aged, he got a lot more accidents. In his final years, he did exhibition driving. He was a gentle trainer. He used his observations and experiences to find his own racing style. He did not like when other trainers mistreated their horses or their fellow drivers on the racetrack. Many times he was called upon by the judges to weigh in on a situation that had happened between trainers on the racetrack. They held him in the highest regard. He never raised his voice at his horses. I don't know how that would be because I have raised my voice several times to my horses. But they said he would hum or sing to them as he raced. When I rode in the pace car in Lincoln County, when we stopped on the back stretch, those guys were singing and talking to those horses. And that was the coolest thing to hear that. On September the 3rd, 1924, he headed to the state fair for Geers Day in Wheeling, West Virginia. The crowd gathered to see one of the greatest reinsmen to ever race. The first heat, Geers came in third with his mare Melody Guy with a time of 2 minutes 14 seconds. He was determined to improve in the next heat. The racetrack was not in good condition and there were several holes there, according to the track reports. The second heat began and Geers was falling behind. Two other horses racing to Geers were very close. The heat was coming to a close and Geers made a move on the track. The horse broke her stride and she caught one of her quarter boots. It pitched him in the air and he fell on the racetrack. They took him to the hospital in Wheeling and he died a short time later of a fractured skull, just like his son. As with any celebrity, almost immediately tributes began to come in. In Fairbury, Illinois, they held a remembrance prior to the race, and the judges' stand was draped in black. In Huntsville, Alabama, they did something as well, and Cleveland placed a plaque in his honor. Now, you will see in this picture that says Big Auto Races Saturday. Harness racing in the South was replaced by stock car racing. Some of the harness racing tracks became stock racing. The Speedway in Nashville, downtown Nashville, turned into a auto track. At the track the next day, there were 50,000 people at Wheeling that came to mourn Geers. His horses, Peter Manning and Sandrino, were draped in black and red around the track. And John Trotwood Moore remarked, "The last great driver is dead. To me, it seems the game is done." I assume in my research, this picture was from the Harness Racing Museum and Hall of Fame in Goshen, New York, where I did a great deal of my research. They had this photograph, and they said it was of his funeral. And I think this is somewhere in Memphis. Geers' body was taken from West Virginia to Memphis to his house of his daughter. And just recently, around 10:30 at night, when I was doing research after my daughter went to bed, I found this image. Not in a Tennessee paper, but in a paper in Kentucky. After the funeral in Memphis, the casket was taken to the train station for the journey to Columbia. So it came into Union Station here in Columbia that still stands today. John Trotwood Moore sent this photograph to the Horse Review for it to be published. And you can go to Rose Hill Cemetery today and see his headstone. Dr. Wooldridge made all the arrangements for his dear friend Pop. And here's the headstone in Rose Hill. Shortly after Pop was buried, news came over the wires that a movement had begun to erect a memorial to the nation's greatest hero of the harness racing track. Also, news came from Wheeling, West Virginia's Harness Racing Board that they would pay the full amount for $6,000 for Geers' appearance, because there was a clause in the contract that said if he was to die, they would not pay for him to be for his appearance. Many places were considered for a memorial for Pop, but it was agreed it should be located in Columbia, where he was buried, and possibly in Rose Hill Cemetery. And these gentlemen are the Geers Memorial Monument Committee of Columbia, Tennessee. They're in front of the Elks Lodge, which was in downtown Columbia. The building still stands today. It's the headquarters of JRN, the Kentucky Fried Chicken people here in town. But in the picture are Harry Porter, William Pigg, F.R. Chafin, Dr. Wooldridge, Mayor Fred Latta, Horace Rainey, William Webster Sr., Will Webster Jr., Joseph Tolley, and Joseph Tolley was on the committee, but he was not present. Mom and I found this picture in my research in New York. If you open the trade publications in New York, the Horse Review that are bound up there, it says Spring Hill, Murray County, Columbia. And it was just so cool to find that. They also proposed another thing to honor Geers, to establish a track and winter quarters for the harness racing industry at the Southside Park called Geers Driving Park, and that did not come to fruition. But if you gave a donation, you got this Memorial Fund certificate. Finally, a site on Mount Parnassus on West 7th Street was selected for a sum of $4,000 to Horace Rainey. The W. Dean Marble Company was awarded the bid. The cost of the obelisk would be $16,500, and the material would come from North Carolina. The final total was $18,158.20. The obelisk stands 90 feet above street level. The base weighs about 65 tons. You can see the top of it from Geers' graves at Rose Hill Cemetery in the wintertime. I've tested it. I've also tried to figure out how to get one of my friends to shimmy up to the top. That's happened. It took 9 months to complete. 6 foot down is a 6-inch rod that is drilled into the bedrock. 12 foot is filled with crushed rock and Portland cement rock. It's not going anywhere. The dedication was supposed to be October the 10th, 1926. It was a very rainy day, and that day, the dedication was moved to the Princess Theater at the Bethel Hotel. A crowd of 500 gathered that day and dedicated the obelisk, and they shared tributes of his remarkable life. And we've got great descriptions of what was said and everything that day. The inscriptions are, on each side, a tribute from those who love the greatness of his soul, from the start of the race through the final home stretch of life. Born at Lebanon, Tennessee, January 25th, 1851, died at Wheeling, West Virginia, September 3rd, 1924. Incidentally, in Wheeling, where the racetrack is, Bob Duncan went on a trip and found out there was a casino there now. Erected to the memory of Edward Franklin Geers by his fellow horsemen and friends throughout the world. His life was an inspiration for coming generations. Temptation knocked unheeded at his door. Geers established records for speed never before achieved by a man and a horse in a sulky. He acknowledged that those records would be surpassed one day, but he believed he was making a difference. The little town of Columbia in Murray County was brought to the national spotlight by the fine harness racers that were bred on this beautiful countryside. In the last paragraph in his book in 1901, he says, "I have certainly achieved a far greater success than I had reason to anticipate at the dawn of my career, to which my mature years have been devoted." His life was very successful because he worked hard, made good choices, and adhered to a high ethical standard. Thank y'all.
Questions?
Yes, sir.
Forgive my ignorance about this kind of racing. Was it common for a trainer to pilot his horse
Yes.
in racing at that
Yes,
time?
sir. Yes, sir. And that's still common today. When we were we went to Goshen, New York twice. We went in July. They have huge harness races there every July. And I got to meet a trainer, Ray Schnicker, of Ray Schnicker Stables, and he did the training and the driving. Yes, sir.
Where's the outlets at in Columbia?
It's on West 7th Street. So West 7th Street's now currently being worked on, but it's towards the fork in the road where it goes Trotwood and West 7th Street. It's a city park. It was given to the city of Columbia when they finished.
I have a question for you all. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Your book already for sale now?
No, not yet. Not yet. Life happens. I'm a mother. I work full time. I'm a wife. I have to help take care of my parents. So
And she has her fingers in a whole lot of pies.
as someone said, I don't know how she does it. I have a lot of helping hands at home.
There are, however, up here some mementos, for lack of a better term. We would appreciate you looking and not touching because some of them are pretty old, but there's some really lovely images. And I have a question for you guys, Spring Hill oriented. There were 3 plaques that Sarah Elizabeth shared with specific information about horses with which Pop Greers was associated. So starting with the one that's actually the furthest north, Star Pointer, where is that plaque?
Is that by the TB tire store on 31?
Very close,
Yeah.
right in front of Fifth Third.
Yeah.
Because the house that belonged to Captain Henry Pointer was at that location where Fifth Third is. The house has been moved out to Kedron, but one of our aldermen at the time, also involved at the Historic Commission, made sure that that plaque was taken down when they were constructing the bank and put back afterward. Okay, the Ewell Farm plaque, that has Campbell Brown. Jimmy's Cleaners, he's cheating because he lives down that road.
Middle Tennessee Bank.
Middle Tennessee Bank. Also interesting on that particular plaque is that there's mention on that plaque of a man named Webster. He was mentioned in your presentation, except on that plaque, Mr. Webster is credited with helping to bring some of the first Jersey cattle to this area. So a lot of overlap in the ventures of these local agricultural businessmen. Okay, the third plaque for Billy Direct. Richard doesn't get to answer that one. Where's the plaque for Billy Direct?
It's on 31 South.
Thanks, Haven.
Yeah, it's on the east side of the highway. It's tilting. We need to get that straightened out.
Yes.
But it's across the street from Haynes Haven. So, so the history of this town, of this county, is all around us, and most of us drive straight by it and don't pay attention, don't slow down enough to read it. And you'll begin to see that there's a lot of overlap in the families in this county, in this community, and the business ventures that they got into. Anybody watch a new TV show called, I think it's What If Joe? What? It's Ordinary Joe. Thank you, Nan and I apparently watch too much TV. But it's basically this concept of what if. What if you'd made different choices? And I sat here and listened to this and thought, what if the state legislature hadn't outlawed
We would be
betting?
very comparable to Kentucky, I would say.
What if those fires hadn't happened on Main Street? Okay. There's a lot of things that have shifted the course, but what it comes back to is what Tom Price talked about, and that is that as the northernmost city, community in Murray County, we've constantly been on the edge of change, for whatever reason. Any other questions for Sarah Elizabeth?
Oh, okay, Naomi, and I'll get to you, sir. Yeah.
The barns at Haynes Haven,
Mhm.
how old are they?
I think, one of them, I think, was there at the Tolley Farm. So the Tolley house burned. They were renovating it, and they had taken a great deal of stuff out from what my
And that was Woodlawn.
Woodlawn, yes. And they took it all out, and then the house burned.
So let's back up a little bit in
Yeah.
terms of history. The location of Haynes Haven was actually the location of a house called Woodlawn, which was owned by Spivey McKissick, who happened to be well, first of all, he was one of the first mayors of Spring Hill. He was a doctor, and his brother happened to be William McKissick, who built the brick house that's in the middle of Old Town on Main Street. McKissicks are obviously prolific in this area. That house was turned over to Thomas Gibson. I think he was a son-in-law of Spivey McKissick, if I'm remembering the tree. The Tolleys purchased that. They were renovating it, and a blowtorch that they had been advised against using in the renovations set the house on fire. The only thing that is still remaining from the original structure is actually the front doors that are on Haynes Haven, because they had been taken off and were leaning against the tree in the front of the house. They weren't actually in the
So
structure.
would the barn be considered a historic building?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been in it when I was a kid,
Yeah.
so that makes it some.
That
makes
Well,
it
it-
ancient,
And the barn, from what I understand, I was in it a long, long time ago as well, not quite as long ago as you, but that barn, I understand, is actually, some people would consider that barn nicer than the house, because it's all wood inside.
Beautiful inside.
It's just stunning inside, but that makes sense because these horses were big money.
Yeah. We went to it's a blue chip farm in upstate New York. We were invited to a breeding farm up there, so I could see it. You could eat off the floor in the barns. And the stud was shipped to New Zealand to winter every year. So that was pretty cool. That was
Okay, last question.
Last question.
Any other questions? All right, my last,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Duplex Road is named after the
Yes.
horse, is that
Yes,
correct?
yes. The post office was named Duplex first.
Duplex Road was actually, roads often were known by where they ended up. They were destination roads. So Duplex Road was actually called Mount Carmel Road for a long time, because when you hit Highway 431, Lewisburg Pike, there was a Mount Carmel church there, and then it was renamed Duplex after the horse.
So in Trotwood Avenue, you trotted out to the woods to race.
Yeah, I'll actually remember that. All right, one other question. How many of you knew who Pop Greers was before you came here tonight? How many feel like you know more about one of the characters in our past now? Every hand, come on. If you don't, talk to the boss up here. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, and
We'll
I'm
look forward
hoping the book will be
December. Look.
December. and I'll keep everybody informed at the library about that.
Please look at what's up here. Please take some snacks, and we will hope to see all of you and more at Rippavilla on November 20th. Thank you, guys. 3 p.m.
You do.